I genuinely look at interviewing like dating. My wife and I are together 15 years, and God forbid that changed. I'd go find a single friend who knew what the heck was going on out there on the dating scene and get some advice. I look at interviewing the same way. If in the course of 20 to 30 minutes here, we can instill some insight for you that will help you be more successful during your telephone interview, I think it's time well spent. So first, have a copy of your resume in front of you during the phone interview. I've seen a lot of instances where candidates are citing statistics differently than what's documented on the resume which the hiring manager or interviewer has in front of them. If you are citing statistics, dates of employment, quantifiable accomplishments, projects you've been involved in, etc., I want to make sure that you're citing it consistent with what's on your resume. That being said, this is not an invitation to read from your resume during the interview. Your resume gets you in the door. This is not an interview of your resume, it's an interview of you. Next, it goes without saying, no negatives about past jobs, past employers, past bosses even. If you sense that the interviewer is probing for negative information, my recommendation is to first answer the question, keeping it short. Secondly, and more important, finish it with a positive. My last boss, unfortunately, was somebody who didn't treat others with respect. Not folks on my team, not folks on other teams. So when we dealt with these other teams, they in return didn't treat us, not our boss or even his team members like myself, with respect. What I learned from this was something I practice in my daily life, both personally and professionally. Treat others the way you want to be treated. What I've found is, if the intent of the interviewer was to continue to probe for negative information and you answer the question with a positive, they will back off. Next, one of the pieces of feedback that I get from the hiring managers that we work with is that the candidates that we work with are significantly better prepared than those folks coming in on their own. And I genuinely believe it's because of this next piece of advice. Take the time to do your homework. Research the company. There's some great information available nowadays. Most companies have a really detailed web page. If they're a public company, they've got annual reports you can look into. If they're a consumer goods company, for example, go visit a retailer. Check out the assortment of their product. Perhaps even talk to a salesperson on the floor who knows their product well and get any impressions they've got of working with a company as a supplier or customer. Leveraging LinkedIn to find the profile of the hiring manager. Perhaps even see if you know anybody in common that you could get insight from based on the company, knowledge of the hiring manager, etc. And based on all of this research, come up with a list of 10 questions. 5 relative to the position and 5 relative to the company. Now you may be thinking, Jay, there is no way I'm going to get through 10 questions in a 30-minute phone interview, or however long your interview is scheduled for. And you might be correct. You might not get to any of the questions you put on paper, I'll counter with. But my experience has shown you don't necessarily show how smart you are by what you say, but more importantly by what you ask. And it's the process of putting these questions to paper that will allow you to ask intelligent questions throughout the discussion. Secondly, when you get to the end of the conversation, if you get the simple question from a hiring manager, do you have any questions? My own experience is, if you were to throw up your arms and go, nah, I'm good, got what I need, thanks, I understand everything, it's going to leave them with one of 2 impressions. Number 1, you're unprepared, or 2, you don't care. 2 impressions we definitely don't want to leave with the hiring manager. Therefore, you've got your list of questions you can pull from. Be ready for their questions, the tough questions especially. And on the surface, the tough questions can look like the easiest questions in the world. For example, number 1 question in my experience that knocks people out of the interviewing process, tell me about yourself. Boy, on the surface it looks like such an easy question, But the challenge is, it is incredibly open-ended. So, whether it be relative to this question or other really open-ended questions, if you are not absolutely certain as to what the hiring manager is looking for, clarify it. For example, Joe, a lot of facets of my background I'm really proud of. Is there something specific that you'd like me to focus on? There are questions that you absolutely should be prepared to answer. If you're out of work right now and in transition, it's very fair for a company to simply ask you, why'd you leave your last job? Why were you let go, for example? First off, my advice would be take responsibility. I'm not saying here that you are a poor performer. However, there's a lot of finger pointing that goes on out there, and people want to make sure that somebody else isn't trying to pass the blame. So try to keep it as upbeat as possible. Explain the business situation. Perhaps you were in a niche that wasn't performing particularly well, and you were an unfortunate casualty of that. The important aspect here is do not let it come across as if you have a grudge. Keep it upbeat, keep it positive. Another question you might be prepared for if you're out of work is, why have you been out of work so long? It's a tough hiring environment right now. So whether you've been looking for a week, a month, or even a year or more, hiring managers inherently with this question are trying to get at the root of a question they're not allowed to ask you. They want to make sure that you're not sitting at home, for example, getting depressed, and ultimately you're going to bring that depression into the workplace. Many other things they might be looking for. But inherently with this question, you want to do your best to keep the answer simple, and most importantly, focus on two things. What you've been doing to keep up to speed with industry trends, industry knowledge, and so forth. That might include attending industry association groups or participating in relevant LinkedIn groups, for example. The second thing they want to understand is, how active have you been in the hiring process? How many job interviews are you going on? If you've been out of work for 6 months and you've only been on one job interview, that's a real big concern right now. If you are currently working, very fair for a hiring manager to ask you questions like, why are you looking to leave your current company? What is it about our opportunity that has got you interested? What do you like and or know about our company? These are all things that with your preparation, you should be able to address. Another question you should be prepared to answer is the compensation question. This is probably the most uncomfortable question for a candidate to address. Frankly, if this is an earlier phone interview in the process, it might even be too premature for them to be even asking this question of you. Regardless, my recommendation for how you approach the compensation question is, if you ever had any interest in politics, this is a great time to pretend you're a politician. Think of a political debate. There's that one question everybody wants to know, what this given candidate's stance is on a given subject. The buildup is there, a couple of weeks in the process. The debate finally happens. The moderator asks the question, how a given politician stands on a subject. And what does the politician do? Always, always, always. They come back and they state all of the facts that everybody already knows. They avoid the question, but they make it seem like they actually answered it. I want you to do that here. The facts in this case are your current salary and your bonus potential. And I would recommend you consider this verbatim. When asked about the compensation question, what do you need to make? What do you need to see to take on this challenge? Joe, I'm currently making X, this base and this bonus potential. I've done my homework. I understand what others are paying for this role, and I trust that if we get to this point, you'll put together a fair and equitable plan commensurate with my experience. And then be quiet. Silence can be deafening, but it's their turn to talk here. When you're in an interview, regardless of whether it's a phone interview or in person, attitude means a lot. And I don't mean ego here. Simple things like smile. It comes across in your voice. Even on the phone, that applies. I used to work with somebody who didn't have the right voice projection on the phone, actually came across as a little bit introverted once in a while. We simply put a mirror on his desk, reminding him to smile when he spoke, and it made a world of difference. Mention the interviewer's name once in a while. Have you ever been in a conversation, the person you're speaking with, they might be answering you, they might even be asking you questions in return, but you can tell psychologically or mentally they're not with you right there. They're kind of checked out, they're paying attention to something else. When you're in person and you say that person's name with some conviction, mentally it's like watching them fall off a chair. It's pretty funny actually. I don't ever want the hiring manager or your interviewer to get to that place with you. I want them focused on you the entire time. And the way that we do this is every once in a while we mention their name. Now this is a subtle thing. Don't overdo it. If you overdo it, it could be really annoying. But every once in a while, Joe, let me ask you about this. Joe, that's a great question. ... You get the idea. Again, don't overdo it. In preparing candidates, I often ask where they're going to be for the phone interview. And often I get the response, I'm just going to take it on my cell phone. I highly recommend you don't do that. Do what is required to get to a landline. I've had a lot of great candidates be knocked out of the interviewing process, not because of lack of accomplishments or lack of skills, but due to a poor cell phone connection. Even if you think you've got a good connection, the natural delay that comes from speaking on a cell phone can often be interpreted by a hiring manager as rudeness. Perhaps they consider you interrupting them, or vice versa, and it becomes a little bit of an uncomfortable situation. So, first rule of thumb, do what it takes to get on a hard landline. Number two, there have been studies done that have shown that in the course of a phone conversation, those people who have been sitting down the entire time, on average 15 minutes into the call, their voice inflection falls off a cliff. Yet, those people who have been standing up or walking around the entire time, their voice inflection remains relatively the same. What they've equated this to is the fact that when sitting down, it becomes very easy to get fixated on a given subject. Staring at the wall, looking out a window, maybe looking at your computer screen as emails are coming in, for example. As a result of that, you come across as distracted, bored, or whatnot. So, it goes without saying, we highly recommend you stand up, if not walk around, during the entire phone interview. Now that you've prepared for the interview, and you're actually on the phone, there's some other strategies to employ. First, as early as possible in the phone conversation, I recommend you figure out what the hiring manager wants to talk about. Now, we may have some general ideas as to what the hiring manager is looking for relative to this role. However, there might be something specific that stands out to he or her on your resume, or maybe in our initial presentation of you that he's really going to want to dive deeper into. So that you can figure out exactly what they want to talk about and can talk apples and apples throughout the conversation, I recommend you ask a question like, Joe, I understand we've got 30 minutes here. So that this is a good use of your time as well as mine, can you help me understand your expectations for the discussion? Now, I'm not recommending you do that so that you can go, you've asked for this, I've done this, you this, me that. But rather, now as you're going through the context of the dialogue, you can be answering his or her questions in the context of what he already told you they would like to hear. It's like going back to school. Professor throws out a pop quiz. Hey, before you hand that out, what are the answers again? I'll figure out where to put them in. The second reason we ask what they want to talk about is at the end of the conversation. Let's assume you're nearing the end of the time that you guys have designated, and you haven't covered something that they had indicated early on was important to them. You can take control and now bring them full circle. Hey Joe, the beginning of the conversation, you had indicated that you really wanted to cover X and Y. I want to respect your time. I realize we're nearing the end of our conversation. Do you want to spend 5 minutes on this? When you're done with the conversation, let's assume you like what you heard and you're interested in the next step. Getting back to my dating analogy, I highly recommend you let them know how you feel, and more importantly, validate that they feel the same way. I'm going to take a tangent here for a moment. In America, would you agree that according to our judicial system, everybody is innocent until proven guilty? Most people would. Now, I don't know what media source you watch. ABC, CBS, CNN. Heck, I've got some people telling me they're watching Entertainment Tonight for their daily news, which is kind of concerning right now. But all kidding aside, it's really difficult, I think you would agree, to watch any news source, watch what they're saying about a given situation, and be able to presume somebody is innocent. It's almost like they're implicated right away. Unfortunately, that translates to the workplace. So think of the last time something went wrong at work. How often is somebody given the benefit of the doubt? Usually there's finger pointing going on in all directions. And unfortunately, this also translates to the interviewing process. So, if the hiring manager is left to assume whether you have a given skill set or not, they are going to assume negative. This has nothing to do with the hiring manager you're speaking with. It has nothing to do with the given company they're representing. This is just human nature, unfortunately. So when I say to you, let them know how you feel, and more importantly, validate that they feel the same way, it's to make sure that they are walking away with a positive impression. And if they have a negative assumption, let's correct it. So, my recommendation to you is at the end of the conversation, you finish with a 3-step close. Step number 1, summarize something that has got you excited about this opportunity before you even speak with them on the phone. It could be anything. It could be their geographic location. It could be something that we've talked about relative to the opportunity. It could be something you learn when researching their website or speaking with others about the organization or even the given hiring manager. Step 2, summarize something that you and the hiring manager connect on. Think of it like this. Last time you had a conversation, sort of an intimate conversation with friends or colleagues, you were driving the dialogue, explaining an experience or situation, and halfway through the discussion, people start shaking their head. You know, they're with you. You get this sense that they wish they were with you during that entire experience. You have officially connected with them. Although it's difficult to do over the phone, I want you to sense when you are connecting with the hiring manager and summarize that as your second step. Thirdly and lastly, you need to blatantly let the hiring manager know that you want to move forward. I speak with a lot of hiring managers who come back and say, I've got great feedback on this candidate. Good skills, outgoing personality, the chemistry was right, they would fit in really well here, etc. But I'm left here scratching my head. I'm frustrated. I can't tell if they're excited about the opportunity or not. And different than the dating scene, they don't want to be left wondering whether there's going to be a second meeting, whether there's excitement on your part. So I'm saying to candidates, you blatantly need to let them know that you do want to move forward. Our styles may differ, but if this were me, it might be something as simple as, Joe, I've got to tell you, I'm really excited about this opportunity. When I learned that it was with company XYZ, immediate interest. You've talked about challenges X, Y, and Z, of which I've shared with you that I've done A, B, and C. I know I could immediately replicate this for you. I'm interested in moving forward. Based on your own expectations, is there any reason you would feel differently? Now, you may be saying, hey, that's a little bit too much detail, a little bit more than is required in a close. I would counter with the following. You know better than I do. This is a role that requires you to be able to ask solid questions, sometimes really difficult questions, but ask them in such a way that you can come back and ask it month in and month out without alienating your cross-functional partners. What better way to demonstrate that than through the questions and the close that you employ in your phone interview? Lastly, when you're done with the conversation, the phone interview, my rule of thumb is before you go to bed at night, you send the interviewer a simple email. If there's multiple interviewers, and even if you send the same email to everybody, send them as individual emails. The email is intended to be simple. It's not a thesis. You're not going to solve world peace here or any of the company's problems. It's a simple representation that you are a professional who dots your I's and crosses your T's. Joe, thanks for taking the time today. I really enjoyed learning more about company XYZ and your need for a whatever the role is. I look forward to meeting you and the rest of the team in person in the near future. It's that simple. Now, this may seem really obvious to you, but 10 to 20% of the emails that I see go out have this issue. Do a spell check. A lot of people are using tools like Yahoo, Hotmail, Gmail, and so forth. Tools that don't have sophisticated spell check programs in them. Type your email up if you need to in Microsoft Word or something similar. Do a spell check, and when it's ready to go, copy and paste it into your email program. You're spending and investing way too much time in this process to skip a 30-second step that may come back and bite you. A lot of people are going to look at the phone interview process and they're not going to take it seriously. You're going to say, you know something, what they're looking for, that's what I do today. I know my job really well. I'm really good at it, and therefore I'm going to wing it. I'm going to take this on. If you'll take the time to do the necessary preparation, trust me, you're going to stand out from the others significantly. If you have any questions on this telephone interview preparation, do not hesitate to give us a shout. Leave me a message, send me an email. Would love to help you out. Good luck.